she sheltered a dying biker from a snowstorm, but what he returned with saved her children. That's how it all begins, with one woman opening her door in the middle of a blinding blizzard and finding a half-frozen, bleeding biker collapsed in the snow at her feet. She only meant to save his life. But the moment she drags him inside, everything changes. Because this biker isn't just running from the cold, he's running from something far more dangerous. When he suddenly disappears, strange men start circling her home. Her kids become targets, and the quiet little town turns into a battlefield she never asked for. Then, on the night her children are trapped in a burning barn, the biker returns. Not alone, but leading an entire brotherhood of outlaws ready to risk everything. But why them? Why her? And what secret was he hiding the night she saved his life? When a single act of kindness sparks a war, will it also save the family she's about to lose? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The winter storm descended without mercy on the North Road, transforming the late afternoon into a hostile wilderness of white. Inside June Archer's auto shop, the wind's howl provided an eerie backdrop to the metallic clinks of tools as she worked beneath the hood of an old Ford pickup. The heater hummed steadily, fighting against the cold that seeped through every crack and seam of the building. In the office corner, Lucas and Emily had created their own cozy space. Lucas lay on his stomach, homework spread before him, while Emily carefully colored in her favorite animal picture book. The soft scratch of pencils and crayons mingled with the storm's fury outside. June glanced at her children through the office window, a small smile touching her lips despite her exhaustion. These late hours weren't ideal, but as a widow running her own business, she did what she had to do. The pickup's owner needed it for work tomorrow, and June Archer didn't make promises she couldn't keep. "Mom?" Lucas called out. "Can we have hot chocolate?" "In a little bit, sweetie," June replied, tightening a bolt with practiced efficiency. "Just let me finish this last—" The screech of tires cut through the storm's roar like a knife. June's head snapped up, her heart stopping for a fraction of a second before hammering against her ribs. The sound was followed by a sickening crunch and the distinct noise of metal scraping against pavement. "Stay inside," she ordered her children, already rushing to grab her heavy winter coat from its hook. Her fingers fumbled with the flashlight from her toolbox as she yanked open the shop's main door. The wind struck her like a physical blow, driving needles of ice against her face. June raised her arm to shield her eyes, sweeping the flashlight beam through the curtain of white. At first, she saw nothing but swirling snow, but then, there, a dark shape lay crumpled at the road's edge, maybe 50 feet from her shop. June trudged through the deepening snow, her boots crunching with each step. As she drew closer, the shape resolved into a motorcycle, its front wheel bent at an impossible angle. Beside it lay a still form half buried in white. "Hey," she called out, dropping to her knees beside the fallen rider. He was a large man, his leather jacket crusted with road dust and now snow. Blood trickled from somewhere beneath his helmet, creating a frightening red stain against the pristine white ground. With trembling fingers, June checked for a pulse, relief flooding through her when she found one, weak but present. The man groaned faintly. "I'm going to help you," she said firmly, more to steady herself than for his benefit. "Can you move?" No response. June knew she couldn't leave him in the snow. With strength born of desperation, she hooked her arms under his shoulders and began to drag him toward the shop. The man was heavy, and the going was slow, but June persisted, her breath coming in harsh pants that frosted in the frigid air. Lucas and Emily stood wide-eyed in the office doorway as June finally managed to pull the unconscious rider into the shop. She positioned him near the industrial heater, its warm air washing over them both. "Lucas, grab the first aid kit from my office," June commanded, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Emily, bring me some clean shop towels from the shelf." The children scurried to help, while June carefully removed the man's helmet, revealing a weathered face lined with scars. He appeared to be in his mid-40s, with graying temples and features that might have been handsome before life had roughed them up. "Blood debt," the man suddenly mumbled, his eyes flickering beneath closed lids. "Coming due?" June's hand stilled for a moment as she pressed a clean towel against the cut on his temple. What did that mean? Who was this man? Emily approached cautiously, clutching more towels to her chest. "Is he going to be okay, Mommy?" "I hope so, sweetie," June answered, trying to keep her voice calm for her children's sake. "Why don't you and Lucas go back to the office? I need to take care of him." The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of focused activity as June cleaned and bandaged the visible wounds she could find. The man drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes muttering incomprehensibly, other times lying still as death. She checked his arms and legs for obvious breaks, relieved to find none, though she couldn't rule out internal injuries. Just as June was considering whether she could risk leaving him to call for help, assuming any help could even reach them in this storm, the man's eyes suddenly snapped open. His hand shot out with surprising speed, fingers closing around her wrist in an iron grip. Their eyes met, and June found herself staring into the most intense gaze she'd ever encountered. Pain, fear, and something else, something desperate, swirled in those dark depths. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then his eyes rolled back, his grip went slack, and he collapsed once more into unconsciousness, leaving June with her heart pounding and 1,000 questions racing through her mind. She gently extracted her wrist from his now loose fingers, absently rubbing the spot where he'd grabbed her. The storm continued its assault outside, but in here, in this moment, time seemed suspended. June looked toward her children, who watched anxiously from the office doorway, then back to the mysterious stranger whose life now rested in her hands. The wind howled its lonely song, and June Archer settled in for what promised to be a very long night. The pale light of dawn crept through the shop windows, though the storm showed no signs of letting up. June had stayed awake through the night, dozing only in brief snatches while keeping watch over her unexpected patient. Her neck ached from sitting in the hard chair, but she couldn't bring herself to leave him unattended. The biker's fever had broken around 3 in the morning, and his breathing had steadied. June had been melting snow in a clean bucket, using the water to keep his bandages fresh and offer him small sips when he stirred. The shop's heater hummed steadily, keeping the space warm despite the frigid temperature outside. Around 7 in the morning, Lucas and Emily emerged from the office where they'd spent the night on the fold-out couch, their hair tousled from sleep. June had checked on them regularly through the night, making sure they stayed warm and comfortable. "Morning, sweethearts," June said softly, managing a tired smile. "There's some granola bars in my desk drawer for breakfast." Emily approached the unconscious man cautiously, her small face pinched with concern. "Did he wake up more, Mommy?" "A few times," June answered, smoothing her daughter's hair. "He's doing better." As if on cue, the biker's eyes fluttered open. This time, instead of the confused haze of the night before, his gaze was sharp and alert. He immediately tensed, his eyes darting to each window in quick succession, taking in every detail of his surroundings with practiced efficiency. "You're safe," June assured him, keeping her voice calm and steady. "You crashed your bike in the storm last night. I brought you inside my shop." The man pushed himself to sitting position, wincing slightly. How long was I out? About 8 hours. You had a pretty bad knock to the head. June stood, keeping a respectful distance. I'm June Archer. These are my children, Lucas and Emily. Can you tell us your name? The biker's expression remained guarded. Better if I don't. His voice was rough but quiet, like he was used to speaking softly. He glanced at the windows again, his shoulders tense. June noticed Lucas and Emily had retreated behind a tall shelf of auto parts, peeking out with wide eyes at their mysterious guest. She couldn't blame them for their caution. There was something about this man that spoke of danger, despite his injured state. Let me at least get you something to eat, June offered, moving toward the small refrigerator where she kept her lunch. You need to rebuild your strength. The man started to protest, but June was already pulling out a sandwich and an apple. She set them on the workbench beside him, along with a bottle of water. You should rest more. That storm isn't going anywhere soon, and you're in no condition to ride. He accepted the food with a slight nod of thanks, though his posture remained alert, almost wary. As he ate, his gaze continued to sweep the shop, taking in every detail until he froze, sandwich halfway to his mouth, staring at something behind the counter. June followed his gaze to the framed photograph on the wall, her favorite picture of Ethan in his firefighter uniform, smiling that warm smile she missed so much. Ethan Archer, the biker whispered, and the shock in his voice made June's heart skip a beat. You knew my husband? June asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man set down his sandwich, his expression transforming into something complex and unreadable. He pulled me out of hell 5 years ago, quite literally. He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. There was an ambush. Bad situation. I should have died that night, but your husband, he saw something worth saving. June sank into her chair, stunned. In all their years together, Ethan had never mentioned this incident. She knew there were parts of his job he didn't discuss, trying to protect her from the darker aspects of his work. But this felt different. What happened? She asked, leaning forward. The biker shook his head firmly. That's not my story to tell, but I owe him everything. His eyes found hers, and for a moment, the hardness in them softened. He was a good man, your husband. Emily had crept closer during this exchange, her natural curiosity overcoming her shyness. Did you know our daddy? She asked, her small voice filled with wonder. The man's expression flickered with something that might have been pain. I met him once. That was enough to know what kind of person he was. Lucas emerged from behind the shelf, too, standing protectively close to his sister. Mom says Dad could see the good in anybody, he said quietly. Yeah, the biker agreed, his voice rough. He could. A comfortable silence fell over the shop, broken only by the constant howl of the wind outside. June watched as the man finished his sandwich, noting how he kept glancing at Ethan's photo, as if drawing strength from it somehow. As morning stretched into afternoon, the storm showed no signs of weakening. The biker grew increasingly restless, checking the windows more frequently. When June approached to change his bandages that evening, she could feel the tension radiating from him. You need to stay at least another night, she insisted, carefully cleaning the cut on his temple. The roads will be impossible until this clears. He sat still under her ministrations, but his jaw was tight. I can't stay long, he said, his eyes fixed on the swirling white beyond the windows. The storm. It's hiding worse things than cold. The ominous word sent a chill down June's spine, but before she could ask what he meant, he turned away, clearly done with conversation for the moment. Outside, the wind continued to howl, and the snow kept falling, trapping them all together in this moment of suspended time. The pale light of morning crept through the frost-covered windows, revealing a world transformed by the storm. The howling wind had finally died down to a whisper, leaving behind snowdrifts that reached halfway up the shop's walls. June stood at the window, coffee mug warming her hands, taking in the pristine white landscape. Behind her, the smell of oatmeal and toast filled the small office space where she'd set up a temporary kitchen. The biker sat on his cot, already alert despite the early hour, his eyes constantly moving between the windows and doors. "Breakfast's almost ready," June called softly to Lucas and Emily, who were just stirring from their makeshift beds on the office couch. Emily rubbed her eyes and padded over to where her toys were scattered. Her face fell when she picked up her favorite miniature motorcycle, its wheel hanging loose. "It's still broken," she said sadly. To June's surprise, the biker looked up from his vigilant watch. "Let me see that," he said, his gruff voice gentler than she'd heard it before. Emily hesitated, looking to her mother for permission. June nodded, and the little girl approached the man carefully, holding out the toy. His large, weathered hands took the small motorcycle with unexpected delicacy. "Ah, just a loose axle," he said, reaching for June's toolbox. "Easy fix." His fingers, which had seemed so threatening the day before, worked with remarkable precision as he manipulated the tiny parts. Emily crept closer, fascination overcoming her shyness. "You know about motorcycles?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "You could say that." He demonstrated each step as he worked, explaining in simple terms what he was doing. "See how this pin holds the wheel in place? It just needs to be secured properly." Lucas wandered over too, drawn by the interaction. The biker glanced up at the boy, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a length of rope. "While I'm fixing this, want to learn something useful?" Lucas nodded eagerly. "This here's what we call a safety knot," the man said, demonstrating the technique. "It's strong, reliable, and, most importantly, it won't come undone by accident." His hands moved slowly, showing each loop and turn. "But it can be undone quickly if you need to. Sometimes that's just as important as staying tied." June watched the scene unfold as she stirred the oatmeal, struck by the contradiction before her. This dangerous-looking man teaching her children with such patience and care. Throughout breakfast, she noticed how he positioned himself to keep both windows and doors in sight, how he ate quickly but efficiently, like someone used to grabbing meals when he could. After they'd eaten, he insisted on checking the property's perimeter, trudging through the deep snow to examine the boundaries of June's land. She watched from the doorway as he studied tracks in the snow, both animal and vehicle, with the intensity of someone who'd learned to read such signs to stay alive. When he returned, snow clinging to his boots, June finally gathered her courage. "You know my name?" she said quietly. "Would you tell me yours?" His whole body stiffened, the openness he'd shown with the children vanishing instantly. "Names make people targets," he said flatly, turning away to stare out the window again. The day passed slowly, marked by the drip of melting icicles and the occasional rumble of snow sliding off the roof. The biker maintained his vigilant watch, though he continued to surprise June with moments of unexpected kindness, helping Lucas with his homework, showing Emily how to oil the wheels of her now-fixed toy motorcycle, offering to check June's tool inventory. As evening approached, June prepared the kids for bed, tucking them into their makeshift beds with extra blankets against the lingering cold. When she returned to the main shop area, she found the biker sitting motionless at her workbench, his eyes fixed on Ethan's old firefighter jacket hanging on the wall. The sight stopped her in her tracks. Something in his posture, the way his shoulders curved inward, the slight bow of his head, spoke of a deep, private pain. She wanted to ask about that night Ethan had saved him. Wanted to know more about this piece of her husband's life she'd never known. But the man's earlier response about names had taught her that some questions shouldn't be asked. Instead, she simply said, "Good night," and retreated to her own sleeping space, though she remained alert, listening to the occasional creak of the building settling in the cold. Her light sleep was broken before dawn by an instinct she couldn't name. The shop felt different, emptier somehow. June rose quietly and made her way into the main area. The cot where the biker had slept stood empty, its blankets neatly folded. The back door was slightly ajar, letting in a ribbon of frigid air. He was gone. June moved to close the door, but something caught her eye, words carved into the frost on the inside of her shop window. Her heart seemed to skip a beat as she read the message. "They'll come. Be ready." With trembling fingers, she threw all 3 deadbolts on the door, checking them twice. Standing in the pre-dawn darkness, June could feel it, danger crawling closer, like shadows lengthening at sunset. She thought of her children sleeping, peacefully in the next room, unaware of the warning left behind by a man who'd appeared in their lives as mysteriously as he'd vanished. The weight of those carved words settled heavy on her shoulders as she stood guard in the darkness, waiting for the sun to rise. Morning sunlight glinted off the frost-covered window, making the carved warning message shimmer before June wiped it away with trembling hands. She couldn't let Lucas and Emily see it. They'd been through enough already. "Mom, I can't find my blue folder," Lucas called from the office area where they'd spent the night. June forced cheerfulness into her voice. "Check under your blanket, sweetheart. It was there when you were doing homework last night." She busied herself making breakfast, trying to maintain their normal routine, despite the knot of worry in her stomach. Emily stumbled out in mismatched socks, rubbing her eyes and dragging her stuffed rabbit behind her. "Can we have pancakes?" she asked hopefully. "Toast and eggs today, honey. We need to get moving for school." June ruffled her daughter's messy hair. "Go brush your teeth while I pack your lunch." The familiar morning rush helped push away darker thoughts, but June couldn't shake the lingering unease as she herded her children into their old pickup truck. The engine groaned in protest against the cold before finally turning over. As they drove down the snow-packed North Road, June kept checking her rearview mirror, though she wasn't sure what she was looking for. Lucas pressed his face against the passenger window, watching the snowy landscape roll past. "Mom, do you think that man will come back?" "I don't know, sweetie." June gripped the steering wheel tighter. "But we're going to be just fine." When they turned into the school parking lot, June's heart skipped a beat. 2 men in leather jackets stood near the entrance, engaged in what appeared to be a heated argument. Their motorcycles were parked nearby, chrome gleaming in the morning sun. What caught her attention were the patches on their backs. Different designs, but both carrying the same threatening presence. Emily's small hand found June's. "Mommy, those men look scary." "It's okay, baby." June pulled her children closer as they walked toward the school entrance. She could hear snippets of the bikers' argument as they passed. "Your territory ends at Miller Creek. Vex won't stand for..." June hurried Lucas and Emily through the doors, fighting the urge to look back. She hugged them extra tight before sending them to their classrooms, then waited until they were safely out of sight before leaving. The bikers were gone when she emerged, but their presence left an echo of unease that followed her all the way back to the shop. The morning passed in a blur of oil changes and tire rotations, normal work that helped calm her nerves. But when June stepped outside during her lunch break, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. tire tracks circled her property, fresh ones, cutting through the snow in a deliberate pattern that spoke of surveillance rather than casual passing. Her hands shaking slightly, June walked the perimeter of her shop. That's when she saw it. A piece of paper stuck under her door, partially wet from the snow. She pulled it free, her heart pounding as she read the message scrawled in harsh black letters. "Stay out of North Road business. Final warning." June crumpled the paper in her fist, anger mixing with fear. What business? She was just a mechanic trying to raise her kids. But then she remembered how the mysterious biker had recognized Ethan's photo, how he'd known her husband's name. Had Ethan been involved in something she didn't know about? Something dangerous? The thought of her gentle, brave firefighter husband having secret connections to the bike clubs seemed impossible. Yet the evidence was mounting. The stranger's reaction to his photo. This warning. The bikers at the school. June spent the afternoon distracted by memories, trying to recall any hints Ethan might have dropped, any unexplained absences or late-night phone calls. But all she could remember was his smile, his dedication to helping others, his absolute devotion to their family. The drive to pick up her children felt longer than usual. June arrived early, parking where she could watch the school entrance. When Lucas and Emily emerged, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. They climbed into the truck, chattering about their day as if nothing was wrong, and June wished she could preserve their innocence forever. At home, she tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. She helped Lucas with his math homework, while Emily colored at the kitchen table. The smell of chicken soup filled the kitchen as June stirred the pot, pretending everything was fine. But her ears stayed alert for any unusual sounds, and her eyes kept drifting to the windows as darkness fell. That's when she heard it, the low rumble of motorcycles in the distance. June's hand froze on the soup ladle. The sound grew closer, and then headlights swept across her driveway, moving slowly, deliberately. Lucas and Emily didn't seem to notice, absorbed in their activities, but June's heart hammered in her chest as she watched the lights pause at the end of her driveway. Seconds stretched like hours before the engines revved and the lights moved on. But the message was clear. They were being watched. June stood at the window long after the sound had faded, her soup forgotten on the stove, knowing with terrible certainty that this was just the beginning. Emily's voice broke through her thoughts. "Mommy, I think the soup is bubbling too much." June turned quickly to rescue their dinner, forcing a smile. "Thank you, sweetie. Would you like to help me set the table?" As she watched her children eat their soup, June's mind raced with questions she couldn't answer and fears she couldn't voice. Whatever connection existed between Ethan's past and these bikers, she would have to figure it out, and fast. Her family's safety depended on it. 2 days crawled by like molasses in winter. June tried to maintain their normal routines, but worry gnawed at her constantly. After another restless night, she decided to call Sheriff Daniels while the kids were getting ready for school. "I've noticed some unusual activity around my shop," June said carefully into the phone, keeping her voice low. The sheriff's weary sigh crackled through the line. "You're not the only one, June. We've had reports of increased biker activity all across the county. 2 rival clubs are pushing up against each other's territories." "What about threatening notes or people watching houses?" There was a pause. "Have you received specific threats, June?" She described the note and the circling tire tracks, but the sheriff's responses were frustratingly vague. He promised to increase patrols but warned her that the situation was complicated by jurisdiction issues and lack of concrete evidence. After school that afternoon, June drove Lucas and Emily to the Anderson farm, hoping some normal playtime with their friends might ease the tension. The Anderson kids had a new litter of puppies, and for a precious hour, June watched her children laugh and play, their faces bright with joy as they cuddled the squirming pups. But the peace shattered on their drive home. 3 motorcycles roared out from a side road, cutting off June's pickup. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel as the riders forced her to pull over, their bikes forming a half circle around her vehicle. Lucas and Emily huddled together in the back seat. The lead rider, wearing a leather vest covered in patches, approached her window. June hit the lock button, but he rapped on the glass with metal-knuckled gloves. "Roll it down, lady. Just want to talk." June lowered the window 2 inches, her heart thundering. "What do you want?" "Word is you've been harboring the wrong man," he growled. "Our business ain't with you, but debts get paid in blood. Remember that." Emily whimpered in the back seat. The biker's eyes flicked to the children, and a cruel smile twisted his lips. "Cute kids. Be a shame if something happened to them." June's voice shook with rage. "Get away from my truck." The bikers revved their engines, circling her vehicle once before roaring away. June's hands trembled so badly she could barely shift into drive. In the rearview mirror, she saw Lucas holding his sister, both of them pale and frightened. At home, June hurried her children inside, checking and double-checking every lock. She pulled all the curtains closed and kept the lights dim, hoping to give any watchers the impression they'd gone to bed early. "Why were those men mad at us, Mommy?" Emily asked as June tucked her in. "They're just bullies, sweetheart," June answered, smoothing her daughter's hair. "But we're safe here together." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. That night, June jolted awake to distant shouting. The clock read 2:17 in the morning. More shouts echoed, followed by the wail of sirens. June rushed to her window and her heart sank. An orange glow lit up the sky near the school. She could see smoke rising, thick and dark against the stars. The old barn that stored the school's sports equipment was burning. June barely slept after that. When morning came, she made pancakes for the kids, trying to project calm as she packed their lunches and checked their backpacks. "Everything's going to be okay," she assured them, forcing a smile. "Have a good day at school." Those words would haunt her for hours to come. The call came at 2:45 in the afternoon. A teacher's frightened voice told June that Lucas and Emily never showed up for their after-lunch classes. June's world tilted sideways as she raced to the school, where she found Sheriff Daniels already waiting. "Security cameras caught 3 men in motorcycle gear leading them away," he said grimly. "We found tire tracks heading toward the old Miller farm." June was already running to her truck. The abandoned Miller property was less than 2 miles away, a crumbling farmhouse and collapsing barn that local teens sometimes used for parties. As she sped down the road, she saw the first tendrils of smoke rising from that direction. Her heart stopped as she crested the final hill. Flames were beginning to lick up the sides of the old barn. Through the gaps in the weathered boards, she could hear children crying. "Lucas, Emily!" June screamed, racing toward the building as fire spread across the dry wood like hungry fingers. Heat blasted her face as she tried to reach the door, but walls of flame blocked every approach. The inferno grew higher, fiercer, trapping her children inside its deadly embrace. June's screams echoed across the field as she searched desperately for a way in, her children's voices growing fainter behind the roar of the flames. The fire had surrounded the barn completely now, turning it into a cage of burning wood and deadly heat. June could feel the inferno's breath on her skin as she circled frantically, calling her children's names into the growing hellscape before her. The roar of smoke filled June's lungs as she circled the burning barn helplessly, her children's cries growing fainter behind the wall of flames. Tears streamed down her face as she searched frantically for any way to reach them. The heat was unbearable, pushing her back every time she tried to get closer. Then, cutting through her despair, came a different sound, the thunderous rumble of motorcycle engines, dozens of them, growing louder by the second. Through her tear-blurred vision, June saw a formation of riders emerging from the snowy field, their bikes moving with military precision. At their head was a familiar figure, the mysterious biker who had disappeared from her shop days ago. The riders pulled up in a coordinated sweep, killing their engines in perfect unison. Their leader barked out orders, and the men sprang into action like a well-trained unit. Some grabbed fire extinguishers from their bikes, while others formed a bucket brigade from a nearby creek, working to contain the spreading flames. Their leader didn't hesitate. He stripped off his heavy leather jacket and sprinted toward the back of the barn, where the flames were thinnest. June watched in horror as he disappeared into the inferno. "Lucas! Emily!" she screamed, starting forward, but strong hands held her back. "Let him work," said a gruff voice. A biker with graying temples stood beside her. "Rylan knows what he's doing." Seconds stretched into an eternity as June watched the flames climb higher. Then, through the smoke, a figure emerged from the back of the barn. The mystery biker, Rylan, staggered out with both children wrapped in his jacket, shielding them from the worst of the heat. Lucas and Emily were coughing but conscious, their faces streaked with soot. "Mommy!" Emily cried as Rylan set them down. They ran to June, who fell to her knees in the snow, gathering them close. She couldn't stop touching their faces, checking them for injuries, while tears of relief poured down her cheeks. "They're okay," Rylan said, his voice rough from smoke. "Got to them just in time." He coughed, wiping soot from his face. "I'm Rylan Knox, president of the North Road Brotherhood. Should have introduced myself properly before." June looked up at him through her tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving my babies." The Brotherhood worked efficiently to contain the fire, preventing it from spreading to the surrounding fields. As the flames died down, several riders set up a protective perimeter around the property, while others helped June and the children into a warm truck. Emily wouldn't let go of Rylan's hand. "You saved us," she said, her small voice still shaky. "Like a guardian angel." Rylan's weathered face softened as he squeezed her hand. "Just keeping a promise, little one." The older biker who had held June back approached them. "Perimeter's secure, Rylan. No sign of those cowards from the rival clan." "Thanks, Tanner." Rylan nodded. "Double the watch tonight. I want eyes on every approach to June's property." As evening fell, the Brotherhood transformed June's auto shop into a fortress. Riders patrolled the grounds while others helped June settle the children. Lucas and Emily were still shaken, jumping at every sound, but the bikers' presence seemed to reassure them. Tanner even managed to make them smile with funny stories about motorcycle adventures. June found Rylan standing outside as the last embers of the barn fire died away, casting an orange glow across the snow. He turned as she approached. "I should have stayed," he said quietly. "When I left your shop, I thought I was protecting you by keeping my distance, but I knew they might come after Ethan's family. When they realized where I'd taken shelter. Why would they target us because of my husband?" Rylan was silent for a moment, his face lit by the dying fire. Then he knelt beside her in the snow, his voice low and intense. "Your husband saved my life years ago. He pulled me out of an ambush when everyone else would have left me to die. That's the blood debt I mentioned. Not something I owed, but something I owed him." He looked toward the shop where Lucas and Emily were finally sleeping, surrounded by watchful Brotherhood members. "I won't fail his family," Rylan promised. "The Brotherhood protects its own, and Ethan earned that protection with his courage. His children will grow up safe, I swear it." June saw the truth in his eyes, the same quiet strength she'd always loved in Ethan. Here was a man shaped by hard years, but guided by an unshakable code of honor. In that moment, watching the embers fade while her children slept safely nearby, June felt the first stirrings of hope since the threats began. The Brotherhood remained through the night, their presence a shield against the darkness. And in the glow of the dying fire, a promise was kept, not just to a fallen hero, but to a family finding its way back to safety, one protected night at a time. The morning sun cast long shadows across the snow as June made coffee in her shop's small kitchen. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured cups for Rylan and 3 Brotherhood members who had stayed through the night. Lucas and Emily sat at the workbench, picking at their breakfast, still jumpy from yesterday's trauma. "Here," June said, passing out the steaming mugs. "It's not fancy, but it's hot." Rylan accepted his cup with a nod of thanks. His eyes carried dark circles from the night watch, but his presence remained steady and alert. Tanner and 2 other Brotherhood members positioned themselves near the windows, scanning the surroundings as they drank their coffee. "I think it's time you knew the whole story," Rylan said quietly, settling into a chair across from June. "About Ethan, and why I owe your family everything." Emily scooted closer to hear, while Lucas pretended to focus on his cereal, but tilted his head to listen. June wrapped her hands around her mug, bracing herself. "It was 5 years ago," Rylan began, his voice low and measured. "I'd gotten caught up in some dangerous business with a rival clan. They decided I knew too much, marked me for execution." He paused, glancing at the children. "They had me on my knees in an old warehouse. That's when your father showed up." Lucas's spoon stopped moving. Emily's eyes went wide. Ethan was working a night shift. He'd seen suspicious activity and followed his gut. When he realized what was happening, he could have called for backup, could have waited, but he didn't. Rylan's hands tightened around his coffee cup. He charged in there, using his authority as a firefighter, claiming he'd seen smoke. Created enough confusion that I could break free. He got me out of there, risked everything to save a stranger. June could picture it perfectly, Ethan's unflinching courage when someone needed help. Her eyes filled with tears. "That's why I swore a blood debt," Rylan continued, "not just to repay him, but to honor that kind of courage. When I stumbled into your shop during the storm, I didn't know you were Ethan's family at first. But once I saw his picture..." He shook his head. "I knew I had to make good on my promise." Over the next several days, the Brotherhood's presence transformed June's property. Teams of bikers worked from sunrise to sunset, rebuilding the burned section of the barn with skilled efficiency. Others installed security lights and reinforced the shop's windows with extra bars. Tanner took charge of organizing the repair crews, his friendly manner helping June's children gradually relax around the bikers. He showed Lucas how to tie various security knots, teaching him which ones would hold strongest against wind and weather. "See this one?" Tanner demonstrated with a length of rope. "It's called a double figure 8. Won't come loose no matter what." Lucas absorbed every lesson eagerly, practicing until his small fingers could recreate the complex patterns. June watched her son's confidence growing with each new skill he mastered. Emily, meanwhile, had appointed herself the Brotherhood's unofficial mascot. She followed the bikers around as they worked, asking endless questions and offering them water from her little plastic cup. The tough men melted around her, accepting her offerings with grave courtesy that made her beam with pride. "Miss Emily," one burly biker said seriously, "this is the best water I've ever tasted. You must have a secret recipe." "It's tap water, silly," she giggled, but her chest puffed up at the compliment. June noticed how Rylan kept a careful eye on both children while coordinating the Brotherhood's efforts. He never pushed for attention or tried to replace Ethan's memory. Instead, he showed deep respect for the photographs and mementos of him around the shop, sometimes pausing to study them with quiet reverence. One afternoon, June found Rylan standing before the wall where Ethan's firefighter jacket hung. He reached out to touch the sleeve gently, then noticed June watching. "He wore this the night he saved me," Rylan said softly. "I'll never forget how it looked in the warehouse light, like some kind of guardian angel appearing out of nowhere." June stepped closer, touching the worn material. "He loved this jacket, said it reminded him why he chose to help people." "He chose right every time," Rylan replied. "The world's darker without him in it." The days fell into a new rhythm. Brotherhood members rotated guard shifts, while others continued reinforcing the property. June's shop stayed open, with bikers discreetly watching over customers who came for repairs. The rival clan kept their distance, apparently wary of challenging the Brotherhood's united front. Each evening, June cooked dinner for whoever was on duty, the shop filling with the sounds of conversation and occasional laughter. She watched her children gradually emerging from their shells, especially around Rylan. His patient, steady presence seemed to help them feel secure again. One night, after a long day of setting up snow blockades around the property perimeter, June prepared a hearty stew for everyone. The shop was warm and bright, filled with the Brotherhood members who had become familiar faces over the past week. Lucas sat with Tanner, practicing his knots while listening to stories about motorcycle maintenance. Emily perched on a workbench, supervising, as she called it, while making up songs about brave bikers fighting off bad guys. Then June heard something she hadn't heard since the barn fire, her children's genuine laughter. Rylan was teaching them some kind of hand-clapping game, his weathered face creased with a gentle smile as they giggled at their mistakes. "Again!" Emily demanded, her eyes bright with joy. "Show us again." Later that evening, as the sun set and the guards changed shifts, June stepped onto the porch for some fresh air. She found Rylan helping Emily hang a small crystal ornament, a gift from one of the Brotherhood members' wives. "It catches the light," Emily explained seriously, positioning it just so. "Like a rainbow catcher." "That it does," Rylan agreed, steadying her small hands as she worked. "And you know what else? It shows everyone who passes by that this is a safe place, protected by people who care." Emily beamed at him, then scampered inside to tell Lucas about her decoration. June watched the crystal turning gently in the evening breeze, scattering dots of light across the porch. Something tight in her chest began to loosen as she realized that, for the first time since the threats began, she truly believed her family would be okay. The ornament caught the last rays of sunset, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the snow. It wasn't much, just a small piece of crystal, but as June watched it sparkle, she saw it through Emily's eyes, a symbol of safety, of protection, of hope taking root again in their lives. The weekend arrived with a fresh blanket of snow, transforming the town square into a winter wonderland for the community festival. Colored lights twinkled in the trees, and the smell of hot chocolate and cinnamon drifted through the crisp air. June watched her children bounce with excitement as they approached the gathering crowd. "Look at all the lights!" Emily squealed, her mittened hands clasped together. Lucas pointed toward a cluster of motorcycles parked neatly at the edge of the square. "The Brotherhood's here already." Sure enough, Rylan and several riders stood near the cookie decorating station, their leather jackets dusted with snow. They looked almost out of place among the festive decorations, but their presence brought an unexpected sense of security to the gathering. Mrs. Peterson, who had avoided June at the grocery store just weeks ago, hurried over with a warm smile. "June, dear, we saved spots for you and the children at the crafts table." She lowered her voice, glancing at the bikers. Those men of yours have been absolutely wonderful helping set up the festival. Such gentlemen." June felt a warmth spread through her chest. The town's attitude had shifted noticeably since the Brotherhood began protecting her family. Where there had been whispers and sideways looks, she now found smiles and included invitations. Emily ran straight to Rylan, who crouched down to meet her eye level. "Want to help me decorate cookies?" she asked, tugging his sleeve. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, little lady," he replied, his gruff voice softening as it always did around her. Lucas hung back, his attention caught by the model train display. An elderly man was trying to fix an engine that had stopped working, his arthritic fingers struggling with the tiny parts. Rylan noticed and guided Lucas over. "Mind if we take a look?" he asked the man, who gratefully handed over the engine. Rylan sat with Lucas at a nearby table, showing him how to carefully disassemble the delicate machinery. "See here? Sometimes the simplest fix makes all the difference." June watched her son's face light up as the engine slowly came back to life under their careful attention. Lucas had inherited her mechanical curiosity, and seeing him share that interest with Rylan brought unexpected tears to her eyes. The cookie decorating contest drew a crowd of giggling children. Emily, her tongue stuck out in concentration, created an elaborate design with Rylan's help. His steady hands guided hers as she piped frosting onto the sugar cookie. "Perfect," he encouraged. "Now just a little sparkle here." When Emily's cookie won first place, she jumped up and down, showing everyone her blue ribbon. "Rylan helped me make it pretty," she announced proudly. The afternoon grew even more surprising when the town's elderly choir gathered to sing carols. Mr. Wilson, the choir director, waved Rylan over. "We're short a bass voice today," he said. "Word is you know these old songs." Rylan hesitated, but Emily pushed him forward. "Please, I want to hear you sing." The sight of the leather-clad biker standing among the silver-haired choir members drew amused glances. But when the music started, Rylan's deep voice blended perfectly with the traditional carols. June couldn't help laughing at the unexpected joy of it all. Her children's faces glowing, the townspeople smiling, and this man who had brought such change to their lives singing Silent Night with elderly church ladies. As the sun began to set, families gathered around fire pits for hot chocolate and marshmallow roasting. Emily climbed onto the bench beside Rylan, her small hand finding his larger one. June's heart squeezed as she heard her daughter's whispered words. "Mommy says you're our guardian now." Rylan's expression shifted, the usual hardness in his face melting away. He squeezed Emily's hand gently, and June saw him swallow hard before he could speak. "That's a big job, little one. I'll do my best to deserve it." The drive home was peaceful, with both children clutching prizes from the festival games. Lucas had his repaired train engine, and Emily wouldn't let go of her blue ribbon. June felt a deep sense of rightness, watching her children chattering happily about the day's events. Something was healing in their hearts. She could see it in their easy smiles and relaxed shoulders. But that peace shattered in the dead of night. The phone's ring jolted June awake. Tanner's voice was tight with urgency. "Get the kids up, get out now, they hit the shop." June raced to her children's rooms, heart pounding. Through their windows, she could see an orange glow painting the sky. She bundled Lucas and Emily into coats, trying to keep her voice steady as she rushed them to the truck. The sight that greeted them at the shop stole her breath. Flames engulfed the building where she'd built her life after losing Ethan. The heat was so intense it melted snow 50 feet away. Fire trucks were already on scene, but June knew it was too late. One of the younger Brotherhood members, Tommy, lay crumpled near the side door. His face was bloody, and 2 other riders were helping paramedics load him into an ambulance. June covered Emily's eyes, but Lucas had already seen. He pressed against her side, trembling. The roar of a familiar motorcycle cut through the chaos. Rylan pulled up, his expression horrified as he took in the destruction. The shop's roof collapsed with a thunderous crash, sending sparks spiraling into the night sky. June stood there shaking, watching her livelihood burn. All the tools she'd inherited from her father, all the memories of teaching Lucas his first repair, all the security she'd built for her children, gone in a blaze of senseless revenge. Rylan approached slowly, his face ravaged with guilt. "June, I'm so sorry. This happened because of me, because I stayed." The flames reflected in his eyes as he watched another wall collapse, and in that moment, June saw all his careful walls crumbling too. This man who had become their protector, their guardian, now stood before her destroyed shop, believing he had brought this destruction to their door. Dawn crept over the ruins of June's auto shop, painting the smoldering wreckage in pale gray light. The acrid smell of burnt rubber and melted metal hung thick in the air. Fire crews were still dousing hot spots, their hoses creating steam clouds that mixed with the morning mist. Emily clutched her mother's leg, tears streaming down her face. "My drawings," she whimpered. "All my drawings were in there." June stroked her daughter's hair, trying to keep her voice steady. "We'll make new ones, sweetheart. Better ones." Lucas stood a few feet away, his young face set in a hard expression that broke June's heart. He shouldn't have to be this strong at 8 years old. He picked up a twisted piece of metal, part of his father's old toolbox, and dropped it back into the ashes. "The whole thing's ruined," he said flatly. "Everything's gone." Rylan hadn't moved from where he stood, staring at the destruction. His shoulders were rigid with tension, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. June could see the weight of guilt crushing him. "This is my fault," he said, his voice rough. "They would never have targeted you if I hadn't stayed, if I hadn't brought the Brotherhood here." "You can't know that," June argued, but her words seemed to bounce off him. "I do know that." He turned to face her, his eyes haunted. "This is how they work. They destroy anything good, anything that matters to their enemies. And now they've destroyed your life because of me." Emily released June's leg and ran to Rylan, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Please don't be sad," she begged. "We can fix it. Mommy can fix anything." Rylan gently disentangled himself from Emily's embrace, and the careful way he stepped back made June's stomach clench with dread. She recognized the look in his eyes, the same look Ethan used to get before running into a burning building, the look of someone about to make a sacrifice. "There's only one way to fix this," he said quietly. "I have to leave." "No," both children cried out at once. "You can't," Lucas protested. "You promised to teach me more knots." "You're our guardian," Emily added, her voice wobbling. "You said so." Rylan knelt down to their level, his face softening as he looked at them. "Sometimes being a guardian means knowing when to step away. As long as I'm here, you're not safe." June stepped forward. "Rylan, please, we can figure this out together. The Brotherhood will stay to protect you," he cut in. "But I'm the one they really want. I'm the target, and I won't let you and your children be collateral damage in this war." The sun was rising fully now, casting long shadows through the smoke. Rylan stood and walked to his motorcycle, his movements deliberate and final. June wanted to run after him, to argue, to make him see that running away wasn't the answer. But she remained rooted in place, one arm around each of her children. He swung his leg over the bike and started the engine. The sound echoed off the burnt walls of the shop. He looked back one last time, his expression full of regret and something deeper that June couldn't quite name. "Thank you," he said simply, "for showing me there's still good in this world." Then he was gone, the roar of his motorcycle fading into the distance as Emily sobbed against June's hip and Lucas kicked angrily at the ashes. Their neighbor, Sarah Miller, arrived shortly after, insisting they come stay at her farmhouse. "You can't sleep in your truck," she said firmly. "I've got plenty of room, and the kids love my horses." The next few days passed in a blur of insurance adjusters, police reports, and concerned townspeople bringing casseroles. The official investigation confirmed what they already knew. The fire was deliberately set. The news spread quickly through the small community, creating invisible lines of division. Some neighbors drew their curtains when June walked past. Others crossed the street to avoid talking to her. She overheard whispers at the grocery store. "Getting mixed up with those bikers," and "bringing trouble to our town." But there were others who stood by her. Sarah refused to let anyone speak ill of June in her presence. The local diner owner offered June a job waiting tables. The elementary school principal assured her that extra security measures were in place. June was grateful for their kindness, but it couldn't fill the hollow space that Ryland's departure had left. The children were struggling. Lucas had become withdrawn, and Emily burst into tears whenever she saw a motorcycle. 1 week after the fire, June returned to the shop alone. The insurance company had cleared her to collect any salvageable items. She picked through the debris carefully, looking for anything that could be saved. In what used to be her office, she found Ethan's old firefighter jacket. It was smoke-damaged but intact, protected by the metal filing cabinet it had fallen behind. June pulled it free, holding it close to her chest as memories washed over her. Ethan wearing it proudly, Emily playing dress-up in it, Lucas asking endless questions about the patches and badges. The jacket represented everything Ethan had stood for: courage, protection, sacrifice. But it also reminded her of how fear had driven him to run toward danger, ultimately taking him away from them forever. June clutched the jacket tighter, anger rising in her chest. She was tired of watching good men run away because they thought it would keep others safe. Tired of violence and fear controlling her family's life. "I won't lose another man to fear," she whispered fiercely to the jacket, her words carrying all the determination and strength she'd built since losing Ethan. The words hung in the air, a promise to herself, to her children, and to the man who had ridden away thinking distance could protect them better than love. June spent the next morning walking through town with purpose, knocking on doors and telling her story. She started with Mrs. Henderson, the retired schoolteacher who had taught both Ethan and June years ago. "Ethan saved Ryland's life," June explained, sitting at Mrs. Henderson's kitchen table. "He stopped an execution. That's why Ryland came back, to protect us, to repay that debt." Mrs. Henderson's weathered hands wrapped around her coffee mug. "That sounds just like Ethan, always seeing the good in people even when others couldn't." Word spread quickly. June visited the hardware store where Mr. Martinez, a Vietnam veteran, listened intently to her story. "Those rival gangs are nothing but bullies," he declared, "and this town doesn't bow to bullies." By afternoon, June found herself in Sheriff Daniels' office. He leaned back in his chair, considering her words carefully. "Tanner from the Brotherhood came to see me this morning," the sheriff said quietly. "Ryland's planning something foolish. He means to ride straight into their territory, alone." June's heart clenched. "He'll get himself killed." "That seems to be his plan, trading his life for your safety." More Brotherhood members approached June throughout the day. Tanner himself caught up with her outside the grocery store. "Ryland won't listen to us," he said, worry etched on his face. "He's convinced this is the only way, but we can't let him do this alone." June straightened her spine. "Then we won't." She made her way to Reverend Phillips, who immediately offered the church hall for a community meeting that evening. As the sun set, people began filling the wooden pews, farmers in worn jackets, teachers still carrying their grade books, elderly volunteers who ran the food bank, and ranch hands with mud still on their boots. June stood at the front, her voice steady as she shared everything. The storm that brought Rylan to her shop, Ethan's past heroism, the attacks, and now Rylan's planned sacrifice. "We can fight this without violence," she said. "We have phones with cameras. We have witnesses. We have truth on our side." Sheriff Daniels stepped forward. "I've already contacted state police. They're ready to support us. We document everything, every threat, every act of intimidation." Tanner and several Brotherhood members stood at the back, nodding in agreement. "We'll keep our distance but stay ready," Tanner promised. "No weapons, just witnesses." Mrs. Henderson raised her hand. "I may be 72 years old, but I can certainly hold a camera phone steady." A ripple of determined laughter went through the crowd. More people stood up, offering support. The high school basketball coach, the diner owner, the retired judge, each one ready to stand against intimidation with peaceful resistance. They formed groups, exchanged phone numbers, and created a communication chain. The plan was simple but powerful. Document everything, stay together, and show the rival clan that the entire town was watching. As the meeting wound down, June checked her phone. A text from Tanner confirmed their worst fears. Rylan was planning to make his move tonight. June looked around the church hall at the gathered faces, neighbors, friends, strangers who had become allies. These were the people who had watched her children grow up, who had mourned Ethan with her, who now stood ready to help save another good man from his own noble intentions. "It's time," she announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. They moved as one body into the cold night air, flashlights clicking on, phones at the ready. Cars started up, and people organized into groups. June felt Emily's small, mittened hand slip into hers. "Are we going to save Rylan?" Emily whispered. June squeezed her daughter's hand, then passed her to Sarah's careful watch. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to show him he doesn't have to face this alone." The determined group moved out into the darkness, led by June and Sheriff Daniels, with Brotherhood members flanking them protectively. They were an unlikely army, armed with nothing but light and truth, but they moved with the quiet strength of a community, united against fear. Dawn broke cold and clear over the junkyard's rusted gates. Piles of twisted metal cast long shadows across the snow as Rylan Knox stood alone, his breath visible in the frigid air. His shoulders were set, ready to face whatever came, until the crunch of footsteps in the snow made him turn. June walked slowly through the morning mist, Lucas and Emily close behind her. But they weren't alone. Behind them came a steady stream of people, Mrs. Henderson with her phone already recording, Mr. Martinez walking tall despite his cane, teachers, farmers, and shop owners. Sheriff Daniels and his deputies spread out strategically, while Brotherhood members, led by Tanner, formed a protective line. The rival clan emerged from their hideout, their swagger faltering at the sight of so many witnesses. Phones rose like shields among the crowd as they formed a calm semicircle, recording every moment. June stepped forward, her voice clear in the winter air. "I know you think fear gives you power," she said, meeting their hostile stares. "But look around. This is our town. These are our homes, and we're not afraid anymore." "You brought an audience to watch you die?" one of the rival members sneered, but his voice wavered as more phones captured his words. "No," June replied steadily. "We brought witnesses to watch the truth come out, about the arson, the assault, the kidnapping of children." Sheriff Daniels moved forward, his badge catching the morning light. "Everything you say and do is being recorded. Think carefully about your next move." The rival gang's leader, trying to maintain control, pointed at Rylan. "This isn't about your town. This is about old debts." "Then let's talk about debts," June challenged. "About how my husband Ethan saved Rylan's life. About how Rylan saved my children from your fire. About how many lives you've threatened trying to prove your strength." More phones appeared among the crowd. Mrs. Henderson's steady hand captured every threat, every confession born of arrogance. The rival gang members, used to operating in shadows, began to shift uncomfortably under the unflinching gaze of an entire community. "You can't hide behind your cameras forever," one of them growled, taking a threatening step forward. "That's assault," Sheriff Daniels called out clearly. "Add it to the list." Deputies moved in smoothly, reading rights as they handcuffed the ringleaders. This evidence was undeniable. Dozens of videos showing their threats, confessions slipping out in their overconfidence. The remaining gang members backed away, their power evaporating in the morning light. A cheer went up from the crowd as the last patrol car door slammed shut. The peaceful resolution felt like a weight lifting from the entire town. Brotherhood members exchanged relieved looks with townspeople who had once feared them. June walked over to where Rylan stood, still processing how his planned sacrifice had transformed into community triumph. She reached out and placed her hand over his. "No one fights alone," she said softly. "Not anymore." The winter sun rose over a transformed landscape as the town came together with newfound purpose. Where June's burned shop had stood, scaffolding now reached toward the sky, surrounded by the steady movement of helpers. Brotherhood members in leather jackets worked shoulder to shoulder with retired carpenters, hauling lumber through the crusty snow. The scent of fresh-cut wood mixed with coffee and hot chocolate as families brought thermoses and home-cooked meals to share. Tanner organized teams of bikers to handle the heavy lifting, while Mrs. Henderson's quilting circle set up a food station under a makeshift tent. The sound of hammers and saws filled the air, punctuated by laughter and friendly conversation. As the week progressed, walls rose steadily from the foundation. Old Mr. Martinez, a retired contractor, supervised the electrical work while teaching younger volunteers. Children darted between the workers, carrying tools and snacks, feeling part of something bigger than themselves. On the final day, Rylan carefully mounted the new sign above the freshly painted door. Archer and Knox Auto, a family garage, gleamed in bold letters against the morning light. Lucas approached him solemnly, holding out a wrench. "Dad said every man who protects us deserves a job," Lucas said quietly, his eyes bright with meaning. Rylan's throat tightened as he accepted the tool, unable to speak for a moment. Before he could compose himself, Emily crashed into his legs, wrapping him in a fierce hug. "You're staying, right?" she asked, looking up with worried eyes. "Forever?" Rylan knelt down to her level, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. Promise." As evening approached, the sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold behind the mountain peaks. June stood on her restored porch, watching Emily and Lucas toss snowballs, while Rylan helped hang strings of warm white lights along the eaves. Her heart felt full as she whispered a quiet prayer of thanks, knowing somehow that Ethan would approve of this new family, built not from blood, but from kindness and courage. When Rylan finished with the lights, he joined her on the porch. Without hesitation, June reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining as they looked over their rebuilt home together. The shop stood strong and welcoming, a symbol of unity, safety, and hope for the future they would share. If this story made you pause, reflect, or even smile, don't forget to subscribe. I post daily, and the next story might be exactly what you need to hear.